Terrizonian settled the capital in the Greenland. They knew it would be a very easy territory to control the North American and the European theater war. And then they started to upgrade the power of the country and then become eventual king, as then they were able to completely bomb rush the rest of the nations, sweeping them as they took over an occupation force. As they had their forces deliberately destroy many nations, they were becoming the more prominent power, able to claim victory and victorious wins against their foes, which were literally getting their ass whipped as we speak. And of course, because the rebellion was not doing well, they literally started to destroy anything. Now, since they were just going to build the power and then wipe a nation, they did that. And then they just started to go make an offland invasion on a couple of fronts. And then Iceland, a real good market, was able to be conquered. They attempted to conquer Iceland, and were they successful, they were able to secure a portion of the North American theater, as then they were able to suppress and dismantle any other countries in the mainland island, securing their pure intentions of a socialist nation. As they were able to sweep through the island and dismantle every single last thing, they became a unified country. Well, not really, but they had a lot of the wood to conquer. And then they sent a force to that area. And then they were able to crack down on the North American theater once again. They knew that the American territory invasion would be very prominent in case of a world democracy. Because America is a made-up democracy. That was a joke. I mean, to be fair, the electoral votes only count. The populist votes don't count. So, yeah. But of course, after the Terrizonians were able to secure victory, they were able to secure some land in the North American theater. They decided to go to the European theater and then possibly travel down to the South American theater. They knew one nation to conquer. If they could secure the South American theater. Because they knew if they could secure the South American theater, the North American theater should fall relatively quickly. As then enough force was able to knock out any other opposing forces, they were doing something called an island jumping tactic. They were jumping through islands, conquering as quick as they can, and these more or less steamroll victories. As the UK then started to lose the UK, then they forced occupation in the UK. The UK was then redestroyed, and when Portugal was posing a threat, they invaded Portugal. Didn't see that coming, huh? Just joking, that was a totally seen event, and then they started to crack down on the upper part of the North American theater. Now, Brazil was a very prominent force there, so was Cuba. Not really. They were just very small, and another nation really did shit. So, their occupation force was now centered at invading a small island. So they can secure themselves a very victorious win. They're able to secure the island, and then Cuba's invasion was prominent. As then Cuba was under occupation to completely have the world order. Cuba being a relatively weak flank between the South and North American territory, then they needed Cuba. But then Brazil, a logistical problem, then they started to break through. All these bots being put to waste by the human who is able to show his dominant support, and then the largest force, bot 320. Understand bot 320 was more logistical. They had to save their forces and then move to the back to the European theater. As then they saw the African theater, a possible opportunity, but there was an opportunity that one of the large nations were being invaded and would have less chance of a defense. They are able to secure part of the African theater, as then they started to break through more of the European theater. As then the Terrizonian was able to break through another part of the theater and wanted to work their way to the Asian theater. Down here. I think this is the Asian theater. I think that might be Japan. Maybe. That is Japan. Now, if they were able to secure a large portion of the Asian theater, there would be no competition. Then the problem of logistical came by. Then they broke. They were screwed. And then the African theater was being invaded. Then they basically quit that purpose. As then they considered that African theater gone. And then they oppressed with a usual. But then they made one sneak attack. Attempted, failed. At the end of the day, they were growing more powerful than ever before. And then a sneak attack from the European theater was able to very quickly push through the African theater. Very quickly and very significantly. They are able to secure a large chunk and it started to break. The African theater. The logistical third of the nightmare. Now what about the Asian theater? Now, since their forces were completely gone, they were possibly going to Russian territory, but I am a geographist, so that could be Russian. Oh, Jesus Christ, what the hell happened here? It looks like they fucked up big time and lost most planes. Then they rediscovered it and then reorganized the counterfeit to bot 320, now becoming a nightmare. They become the entirety of North America. The one field plane they had an advantage in. They had to keep a war going and going and going on the Asian theater to secure victory. They kind of were not doing good. And then America was going to be finally brought back because of Skirmish invasion. Well, then we were able to forbid to secure and then started to attack that theater. Since they knew that theater would be a problem later, Japan was going to be left independent for now, since they had logistics. When this reconquest of the North America territory failed again, they sent a new force. And the Madagascan force was relentless, to say the least. They were able to be halted for a very short period of time and then became more relentless. They were screwed. They were breaking in, then they had logistics on the mind, and then the reconquest of North America was logistic. They were able to to get a lot of this territory back. And then they were able to break. That force was able to then evaluate their asset. And then hopefully just enough to stop and curl the invasion. Just enough for the reconquest of North America to become very successful. The more and more the relentless these attacks became, then they knew Japan was their only hope at a long-term success because they had to have an island nation. So, they boarded for the Japanese invasion because the Empire of Africa was coming at large. That was also known as Madagascar. Madagascar being the large threat and the most powerful threat, they were able to reconquer an invasion force to break a bit. But they needed that ship. They were able to successfully take out Japan in the entirety, and then they wanted these as a back asset. So in case they would eventually learn how to come back in more than one format. Then they broke on that theater. The Japanese theater looked secure for now. And then they're like, let's just start a new little thing. As the Japanese theater was their last holding they had left. The Terrizonian is now stuck in the Japanese territory and of course this upper territory. Now, they had a choice. Attack that playing field. They bomb rushed them. And then their attack came as prominent. And then they wanted to secure the Japanese theater as good as theirs. And then they were able to secure Japan as they were successful enough to conquer. And then they saw some tiny ass island. They're like, yeah, how about that's ours now? And then they turned another tiny ass island into theirs when the Japanese bot was about to be erased. They then were able to reconquest and asset the forces there to have a bit of Korea. And this was becoming a bit of a surprise since their assets in one territory have been basically growing. And then the Korean Peninsula, then they had assets in this peninsula. Then Madagascar became the international powerhouse, but they didn't have all of it. Then they broke to a degree, and then the Korean Peninsula. Then they wanted to stage the border attack to possibly grow the border attack to grok the border. They want that border to stay in the Korean Peninsula, but then a particular part of the island they wanted. So then they did an old classic island hopping strategy, since instead of complete annihilation, they just wanted where they couldn't be completely annihilated. No matter what they did, they wanted to make sure Terrizonian would still stay alive. And currently, the more Asian peninsula. They were able to then they lost Korea. Korea being the massive peninsula, they wanted Korea back. So, they had a very small force that was very unsuccessful and very much was a failure, which was to take back the Korean peninsula. That were very, very terribly, so they kind of went their highland for self-preservation. They knew that if they were these multiple tiny ass islands, they could not be completely wiped from the map. So then, they decided to stick down, just to take back the UK. They knew that this could be successful, since they were doing this from another. It looks like the Japanese territory was currently being guarded. And secured. It was for now. The Madagascar Empire very powerful, very, very powerful. Then they wiped out. Then they needed that more than ever. They wanted monotony warfare, but then the UK becoming a new and improved territory, they grow the power of the UK. The UK very, very powerful nation. And their retaliation was to take over the entirety of the UK. Then was that. To use that to become a bigger dot, and then to possibly break up connection there and go back to the Japanese theater. They knew that this could be a pretty good opportunity to take back Korea. Well, that was because they were able to successfully put a dent on the occupation of Korea. Since they were not able to continue their invasion force, they lost that war. But they learned one thing, to take opportunity comes from. And then they attacked back on this blue and the Philippines! Japan, the Japanese territory, now Terrizonian, was repeating history by attacking the Philippines. Yet again, this is happening. Historical accuracy, not so much, as they saw a weakened nation, but one capable of being a disturbance in the Madagascar Empire. They weren't able to become a disturbance enough to be noticed, but they did want to take back parts of the island. You see, the new islands have a lot that is self-defense than the mainland, so the kind of the game was be very monotonous, as they were able to claim the territory they thought would be necessary to win the war. They were able to claim a large portion of the territory, and then claim the territory they did. And then the force, the pink parts, were showed, and then they were completely oppressed. So they gave up on that peninsula, but they broke for the next. And then the once mighty empire was now being put to rest. And they considered it the time to attack. As then, time and time again, the self-preservation was going to fail. And they had an uprising, while Japan had a downrising. They saw a noticeable decrease, and then they wanted to know the occupants, and then they thought the Japanese were going to be this dumb boy. That's like, yeah, right, no, we're going to take this land back. So then they were like, you know what, they get the Philippines at the Philippines. They're going to take the Philippine ransom and take it again and again. This has been a very long, monotonous warfare. And then they were able to successfully guard the Philippines and then cause an uprising. They were waiting for some type of uprising to a degree. And then an uprising to a degree happened. And this. Then that border broke. They wanted the Korean peninsula, and then part of Japan was stolen, and then they sent forces to claim that former Japanese, the Japanese Terrizonian territory back. The force was very monotonous, very slow process. They were unsuccessful at the end, and knew to put their assets in the new war. They did not like the war, because then of course the weakened state of Japan that the Terrizonians were currently in were completely unforeseen, because the Terrizonians were very quickly, well, then they were able to break through to steal a large chunk, and then they saw that weak spot, a nation crippled. So they just kind of freaking wiped out any nation left that could dare question their might. As they did that, they set a tiny island that belonged to the purple team. So they went there and took it. And they were able to make pretty good progress. The first time around, they made pretty good damn progress. And then they tried again. The Korean Peninsula again was under question to go for the Korean Peninsula. There was been no disturbance. And then the surrender. When the Korean Peninsula was secure, they knew a thing. Attack or a war is happening. They took that strategy and failed. Unfair with the strategy, it was a pretty unsuccessful and remarkable strategy. They were able to take the strategy and invade. This war became more monotonous and was a waste of time. Basically, they were in a position where they can't get larger, they're in a terrible position, and the war was almost about to be over. Madagascar won.